Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines this hour. New talks on the Ukraine conflict are scheduled in 3 weeks. Negotiators from both sides express cautious optimism for a ceasefire deal. The US secures access to Somaliland's rich mineral deposits. Officials say the pact boosts American strategic interests in the region. Ghislaine Maxwell challenges the release of sensitive court files. Her legal team moves to block the public disclosure of documents. President Trump raises global tariffs to 15%. The sweeping new trade policy aims to protect American industries. Iran's supreme leader Khamenei delivers a sharp response to Washington. He warns the US against a further interference in Tehran's affairs. Pakistan launches air strikes on Taliban targets in a major escalation. The Taliban immediately vows retaliation against Islamabad. Tensions flare between Italy's Meloni and France's Macron. They clash publicly over the murder of a prominent activist. World leaders at the AI summit in Delhi adopt the landmark Delhi Declaration. It sets global standards for responsible AI governance. All right, viewers, now on to the top focus. According to reports, India and the United States have decided to reschedule the chief negotiators' meeting over the interim trade deal, which was likely to take place next week. A 3-day trade meeting between officials from New Delhi and Washington was likely to begin on February 23rd. Reports say that the meeting will be scheduled after each side has had the time to evaluate the latest developments and their implications at a mutually convenient date. The development comes in the wake of the US Supreme Court's ruling against the Trump administration's earlier sweeping tariffs. On Friday, Trump imposed a 10% tariff on all countries, including India, effective from February 24 for a period of 150 days. A day later, he announced that the rate would be raised to 15%. Joining me now in this discussion is Mithali Nikore, economist from New Delhi. Thanks very much, Mithali, for joining me in this conversation. As you would know, there's a lot of uncertainty around it at this point in time. But what is your understanding of what rates would apply on New Delhi? Is it 18%? Is it 10%? Is it 18 plus 15%? Where do we stand right now?
So, I think the day that the Supreme Court ruling came, that day it became clear that the rates cannot be 50%. And at this point in time, 18% has not been enforced because 18% has only been negotiated. So 18% would not come into effect at this point in time. Even until the tweets came from the Trump administration, we were still operating at 50%. Now, after the Supreme Court ruling, it went down to 10% because that immediately within an hour of the Supreme Court ruling, President Trump announced it as 10%. And yesterday, President Trump tweeted and made it 15%. So again, by Monday or Tuesday from US time, we should have clarity on what the new rates are. But in my view, they should be standing at 15% as per the latest, points from Truth Social.
Yeah, all right, sure. Then in that backdrop, how significant are these meetings starting Monday going to be between India and the US? And what all are the key, issues that will really need to be addressed?
So as you've seen and you just mentioned, a lot of the critical meetings between India and the US with the high-level delegation have been rescheduled. They are no longer happening from Monday. They were scheduled to happen on Monday, but then the Supreme Court ruling came and understandably those were rescheduled, and we should see, when they happen next because the new dates have not been announced. The specific meetings that are still going to happen from Monday In my view, and again, the opposition has also said this in the parliament, and I'm pretty sure that the government is already thinking about this. At this point in time, India's negotiating position has improved considerably, and also this is applicable to all global South countries that are looking for potential deals with the US. The negotiating position suddenly for all countries is different, because if you're negotiating 50 or 60% tariffs versus 15% tariffs, which also have an expiry date of 150 days, it's a
Yes.
completely different negotiating position.
Yeah. So what impact is it having right now on global trade and also the markets?
So we can see that the markets already were a bit down yesterday, in whatever trades were remaining, and again we'll see on Monday, how the markets open. But I do think that for global South markets, particularly India and several other global South countries, and then even for economies in the EU, UK, Japan, the GCC countries, we should see an uptick in the markets, because suddenly the position of these countries has been restored in the global trade order. On the other hand, I expect that the US markets will have a massive meltdown, possibly next week, throughout next week.
But is it also likely that even in the global South and other trading partners of the US, the markets are going to remain volatile considering the uncertainty that's prevailing?
No, definitely there will be some volatility, but I do expect that, after a day or two of volatility over the week, the markets will understand and adjust that, the bargaining power of all trading partners has improved. They can secure much better trade deals. In fact, they can even operate without trade deals, because, the imposition of tariffs themselves has been illegal. So in such a scenario, it automatically creates a situation where the partners, trade partners, and those dependent on US trade can negotiate from a position of strength. Also, this means that, if you look at the global trade scenario, countries have already taken several efforts to diversify away from the US and find new trade partners. And I believe that that trend will continue, because countries will continue to trade with other partners and not only rely on the US, given the mayhem and chaos that's going on there.
Right. Thanks very much, Matali, for joining me in this discussion then. And we proceed now, viewers. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has urged US President Donald Trump to treat all countries equally after Trump imposed an additional 15% tariff on imports following a Supreme Court ruling against most of his global tariffs. Lula has also stated that the meeting scheduled between him and Trump next month will likely focus on trade, immigration, and investments. Trump and Lula last met face-to-face in Malaysia on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit last October. Let's listen in.
E eu quero também dizer para o presidente Trump que nós não queremos uma nova Guerra Fria. Nós não queremos ter preferência por nenhum país. Sabe? Nós queremos ter relações iguais com todos os países. Nós queremos tratar todos em igualdade de condições e receber deles um tratamento também igualitário com os outros países. Se isso for possível, eu acho que tudo voltará à normalidade. E é isso que eu espero. Porque o Brasil tinha a disposição de dar um exemplo ao mundo de fortalecimento do multilateralismo, sobretudo depois que o Trump anunciou as taxações de forma unilateral. Nós temos que dar um exemplo de que a gente pode juntos ter mais força para poder vencer essa batalha. Então, eu acho que os países como Índia, Brasil, Austrália e outros países do sul global podem estar juntos.
All right, viewers, after almost a year, the two leaders are now expected to meet once again. Brazil's president is, of course, urging Trump to treat all countries equally as far as the additional 15% tariffs go. Lula has also stated that the meeting between them will be focusing on trade, immigration, and investment. This meeting is scheduled next month between the two leaders. By then, there is also expected to be some clarity as far as the tariffs from the United States go. Collins Chong-Yu-Keet, Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst from Kuala Lumpur, joins me in this discussion. Collins, thanks very much for joining us. There's, of course, focus going to be on investment, trade, immigration. Which one of these do you think needs the most focus right now?
Well, we've seen how Da Silva has been prominent in speaking up for the global south, and of course urging Donald Trump to treat all our countries equally reflects the fault lines involved, and also the wariness and strategic dilemma facing Brazil now. We have seen how Brazil is structurally and economically intertwined with China mostly, but also financially exposed to the dollar system, and of course also it is now being for Lula to also showcase the newfound voice of Brazil, especially regards to what has happened in Venezuela and now with regards to Iran. And this is early stage positioning in a wider contest over dollar dominance, as well as this trade realignment, of course also to showcase greater solidarity with China and other partners in BRICS and Global South as a whole. Viti.
Right, now Collins, Lula had also been supporting the United States as far as his operations in Caribbean and Latin America were concerned. Now with Maduro still in the US, do you think talks can also center around US presence in Latin America? He's also pressuring Cuba and countries trading with Cuba at this point in time. Also with Colombo, he just met the leader. There still remain several uncertainties, however.
Yes, we have seen how Brazil, as I've stated, is facing a newfound strategic dilemma here. On one hand, he has been trying to also portray itself as the natural conventional leader in Latin America in terms of also showcasing a voice, but at the same time also it is trapped between the need also to be aligned mostly with most of Trump's foreign policy. Lula's tone is very much calibrated. It's not entirely anti-US in that sense. It's pressing for greater predictability, greater confidence in terms of managing this newfound strategic dilemma. But also we have seen how Brazil's economy has also depended heavily on, especially on China, but also on the US, and Lula cannot afford to be seen as to be aligned strongly with one side or the other. And of course, also we have seen the need also to calibrate very carefully on the issue of Cuba, as well as also on the issue of Venezuela. We have not seen that much of a strong anti-US messaging or narrative being seen here, and mainly for economic reasons, but also with this inevitable geographical fact that Brazil will need to play in terms of managing these future relations in the Western Hemisphere, as well as also respect to the geopolitics of Latin America. And of course, this latest tariff measure also, we have seen how this messaging has been very much calibrated to ensure that both sides are served in terms of BRICS, in terms of Global South, in terms of traditional allies of the developing world, as well as China, but also at the same time not to be seen as sending a very wrong message to President Trump, which will incur greater economic retaliation, which will also affect greatly the state of Brazil's economy now, especially.
Right, Collins, do stay on with me as we now proceed to look at the Ukraine war. Viewers, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has expressed hope that a new round of talks on the Ukrainian conflict could take place within 3 weeks. He indicated that these talks could lead to a meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Witkoff said that he and Jared Kushner have presented proposals to both sides that could bring them together. He suggested a trilateral meeting would eventually include US President Donald Trump, but only if a concrete agreement can be reached. Witkoff also expressed hope that the next few weeks could bring some good news on the settlement of the conflict. Request Collins to join me back in the discussion here. Collins, what is your expectation from next round of meeting? What do you think will really be the outcome?
Well, it depends on how much and to what extent Russia is willing to hold this out. We've seen also various strategies have been employed in terms of having this greater leverage in these negotiations, and as to how long Russia can sustain this. It has been for years now, and of course the strategy to escalate to de-escalate, and of course also to see the extent and volume of the support system being given to Ukraine, both by Europe and by President Trump. All these maneuvers have seen little benefits or returns to both sides, and these new talks also suggest that neither side has achieved any decisive breakthrough, and of course escalation has also reached some this saturation point where we have seen lower or diminishing returns on both sides, and but I'm optimistic that the team led by Wickoff, of course the groundwork has been done for the past couple of weeks, for the past couple of months now, and the window to seal any deal is tightening now, and of course, but the factor of the current conflict in Iran is also playing deeply in terms of how these talks will shape up in the next couple of weeks, as to as to gauge the willingness and strength of the U.S. posture, both on the sidelines of what has happened in Venezuela as well as what might happen to Iran, and this will also influence greatly as to how Putin and the Kremlin will also decide in the coming weeks. But I foresee optimistic openings ahead in the next couple of weeks, and of course President Trump will not be distracted by this second theater in Iran, but I foresee this will also actually support and in parallel strength to the negotiating team from Washington, especially by Wickoff, to further pressure Kremlin to secure a deal, especially also with Ukraine as well.
All right, Collins, thanks for that. Once again requested to stay on. We move on. Viewers, now news from France. At least 2 explosions have rocked downtown Lviv, a city in western Ukraine, earlier today. Lviv's mayor Andriy Sadovyi has described the blasts as a terrorist act. Let's listen into his statements.
Однозначно, це є терористичний акт. Маємо 15 людей, яким зараз надається медична допомога. З них частина в дуже важкому стані. Одна дівчина поліцейська загинула, співчуття рідним, близьким. Оперативники працюють. По пошкодженням дуже багато повилітало вікон. Зараз слідчі дії, коли все закінчиться, звичайно, приберемо людям.
The explosions have reportedly left 1 police officer dead and injured at least 24 others, with several of the victims in critical condition. The blasts have occurred shortly after police responded to a report of a break-in with homemade explosive devices believed to be responsible. Investigations are underway on this incident. In a separate but related escalation, Russia has launched a brutal overnight assault on Ukraine, firing 50 missiles and 297 drones. The strikes targeted key energy infrastructure, particularly in Kyiv, Odessa, and central Ukraine. At least 1 person was killed in Kyiv and several others were injured. The damage also affected dozens of homes, particularly in the capital's surrounding districts. In Odessa, a drone attack on energy facilities sparked fires. These were soon extinguished. Request Collins to join me back in this with his comments. Collins, even as the US negotiators are saying that Putin and Zelensky are very close to meeting together and the ceasefire is likely. These bombings are continuing. Of course, Ukraine is claiming it to be a terror attack, but where could all fingers possibly point right now?
Well, it is not really surprising. It is expected. We have seen how this has been happening for previously, and to, of course, escalation immediately before any deep diplomatic overtures or breakthroughs, more often than not, will mean that this is being seen or need to be seen as strengthening the bargaining position, of course, leverage, as well as demonstrating the capacity to escalate, the resilience to also sustain this, and of course any move to buy time, to regroup and all that, this have been used in the past, and it signals the advantage of endurance on the side of Russia also. But the choice of the position, the venue in Lviv, represents, of course, Western Ukraine, represents the reach and volume of the Russian force, as well as also the significance of it as the cultural and logistical depth of the site, and of course it has broken the perceived relative safety perception of the area, and this is a multi-layered hybrid warfare in various means being used in terms of urban explosion, in terms of different this barrage of missiles being used, and energy again has been used as a tool, as a strategic weapon, where strikes on energy grids reduce industrial output as always, but also it gives this strain on civilian trust, confidence, and endurance, and of course the pressure on the European solidarity on Ukraine. So energy warfare has always been used as one of the tools. In fact, one of the more cost-effective strategic tools being used by Moscow. And but again, despite all this, I foresee that this is a classic maneuver being used. But I don't foresee that to affect the coming negotiations greatly. As I've stated, both sides will need also to come to this agreement. And despite the various arguments that Russia has again the advantage of time to sustain this, I don't think that is happening, and both sides will need also this is the best time especially for Ukraine and especially for Russia also, now that we have this strong team in place, especially with the personal commitment of President Trump to ensure that this finally is coming to fruition. And I'm very much optimistic for the next couple of weeks despite all this happening, and we will continue to foresee that this will happen also in the next couple of days now, to gain leverage, to ensure that there's momentum on the ground, to send this signal to both sides that Russia still has the capacity to do that, in fact, despite the possibility of any failure in talks. And this is what has been happening in the past, and there's no surprise there. Pretty.
Collins, thank you very much then for joining us for these discussions. And viewers, we now proceed. Now, Somaliland has said that it is willing to grant the United States access to its mineral resources and military bases in a move aimed at deepening strategic and economic ties. Officials in Somaliland said such cooperation could bring investment and security benefits while strengthening their international profile. The territory, which declared independence from Somalia in 1991 but lacks widespread recognition, has sought stronger partnerships with Western powers. Any agreement could have significant implications for regional security and great power competition in the Horn of Africa. Well, viewers, that's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World.